We all say we want to have a blessed life, but what does that really mean? Is it simply having a nice car, a big house, new clothes? What if a blessed life isn't what you think? What if it's more about what you give away than what you hold on to? What if it's more about the contents of your heart than the contents of your bank account? How do we really live the blessed life?
Well, man, I am so glad you're here. Before we get started on week 3, I know there are a handful of folks, a lot of folks in the room who are brand new to Journey, brand new to this thing. I want to tell you a couple of things that you need to know to kind of navigate the next little bit. The first thing is it's okay to play on your phone here, okay? I mean that, like if you want to play solitaire, it's okay. We get it. I have to do other things too. But we also have a site called ourjourney.news. If you want to open up your phone and pull up ourjourney.news, you can follow along with the sermon on there. There's some notes and all the Bible verses are in print. That way you don't have to figure it out and you can read it for yourself. That's on there. There's also stuff about information about Journey and all that kind of stuff on there too. So flip over to ourjourney.news. Anybody can do that. Second thing I want you to know is if you're new here, you have some questions about this group of people. I get it. We all have questions about some of them. So it's really good stuff, especially our elders. Some of them, I have questions about Bill all the time. But we would love you to know this. This is very important to us. The first thing I want you to know is that we're not a group of people that used to be people like you. And we're not a group of people who tolerate people like you. We're not a group of people who try to change or fix people like you. We're a group of people just like you. And we're just trying to figure out a better way to live. And we believe that better way to live is found in Jesus Christ. And we are here to take our next step toward Jesus. And so we're thrilled you're here to be a part of that. But I want you to know one more thing about them, about this group of people. And you may not know this, and they may not know this, but this group of people is filthy rich. I'm not kidding, okay? I'm like some of you are like, are you serious? Did he just say we're filthy rich? Yes, we're filthy rich, every one of us. I mean, in fact, even if you're here for the first time, I know this about you. You're filthy rich too. You may not get it, right? Because we don't feel rich, And I don't feel rich. I don't feel like I'm rich, but I'm rich. I'm really rich, In fact, if you make more than $15,000 a year, you're in the top 5% of income earners in the world. Top 5%. 95% of the world's population makes less than you make. That's crazy to think about. That we're so rich in our world, right? That I have an entire room in my house. It's one of the biggest rooms in my house. I have an entire room in my house dedicated to housing my car, And it only can get one car in it because there's too much junk everywhere else, There's all kinds of crap. My lawnmower runs better than most people's cars. It's amazing, when you consider the world's population. That's a pretty amazing thing for us to understand. Some of us are so rich that you have a bathroom inside of your bathroom. Like you have a bathroom where you can wash your hands and then you have another room inside the bathroom that just houses the toilet so that you don't have to look at the toilet while you do other stuff, or smell it while other people do other stuff. But so you know what I'm saying? So the thing is that we are rich people, It's pretty crazy when you start thinking about how blessed, how rich we really are. And so in 1 Timothy, Paul talks to Timothy, he's a young pastor guy, and he says, hey, Timothy, I want to give you some pointers. All throughout the book of Timothy, both books, in fact, there's 1 and 2 Timothy, he's given pointers to Timothy and telling him, listen, here's how I want you to lead, the things I think that you need to say because they're important. And he says, 1 Timothy 6, or chapter 6, 17 and 18 says this. He says, teach those who are rich in this world. And we know that's us, right? Don't feel rich, right? We don't feel rich, but we are rich. That's an important thing. Teach those who are rich in this world to use their money, not to be proud, and to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, I'm not rich. But the problem we had, and we talked about this in week 1, the good news is we're rich. The bad news is we're rich. We have a tendency to not believe that. And so, because we don't feel rich, we spend our time trying to get rich. Because we're busy trying to get rich, we never understand that we already are rich. And when we don't understand that we already are rich, we never learn how to be rich. You get what I'm saying? The problem is we never understand how to be good at being rich, never know how to be good at handling our resources and honoring God with them, and in a way that is good and useful to our world, to our community, the people around us. So we never learn how to be good at being rich, so we just are rich and we kind of suck at it. So what he's telling us is like teach people who are rich in this world, and that's us, how to use their money to be good at being rich. Most of us don't feel rich, so we go and play the lottery, right? The lottery, it's like $6 billion lottery, okay? The lottery is a tax for people who are bad at math, okay? So, like, if you're bad at math, you think that the lottery is gonna work, it doesn't work, right? I'll probably buy a lottery ticket. I'm not shaming you, I'm not killing you. It's fun to think about it for 2 minutes and spend $1, right? And you go $1, and I get to dream for a minute. My wife always says, that money will ruin you. If you got that money, it would just kill us. It would be, I don't want that money. I'm like, I know it probably kills, but man, wouldn't it be fun to try? You know, like, so she's like, well, probably going to kill you anyway. So what's the difference? So, but anyways, the thing is, man, we spend our time trying to get rich and we just do everything we can. And we never learn that's not how rich people think. Rich people need to be people who do good with what we've got. And that's in fact what it says, what we talked about for the last several weeks, is that we need to understand that we are rich. Then last week, Chris killed it, man. It was awesome. It was great to get to sit with my wife. It was great to get to talk about somebody's sermon. Because, as a pastor, nobody wants to sit at the dinner table and talk to you about your sermon, So, it was great to talk about Chris's sermon, and we were able to think and talk through it. And, man, Chris said this statement. It blew me away when he said it. It's easier to trust God with our eternity than it is with our present. Isn't that the truth? When he said that last week, I was like, oh, that's the truth. It's so easy to trust God with our eternity, or it's much easier to trust God with our eternity than it is to trust him with today. It's not simple, right? To just go, oh yeah, God, I trust you with my eternity. The question is, do I trust you with the money that I get in the next 2 weeks? Do I trust you with the relationships that I have? Do I trust you with my kids? Do I trust you with my job? Do I trust you with my parenting? Do I trust you with my marriage? Do I trust you in life day to day is a much bigger question than do I trust God for eternity, something that's all far off and I don't really know much about it anyways. It's much easier to trust God with our eternity than it is to trust him with our todays. So the next verse of the passage, we talked about good news and bad news. We talked about how last week about trusting our money rather than trusting God, and trusting God rather than our money, and the dichotomy and the tension back and forth there. This week we're talking about verse 19, and the next verse says this: tell them, that's us, people who are rich people, right? Tell them to use their money to do good, that they should be rich in good works and in generous to those who are in need. Do good. It's like kind of a weird phrase, isn't it? To do good. I mean, because you've heard words like you're a do-gooder. That's not usually a positive thing, right? You're a do-gooder. I don't know. But then there's what does do good mean? What's it mean to be a person who does good things? Does it mean just that you see a guy under the stoplight at the stoplight and you go, hey, I should give him $1, right? Or maybe I should give him $5. Is that good? Is regular $1 and really good is $5? Or maybe I want to be really, really good and give him $10. It's crazy. But then what do I do about the next homeless guy? Or the next one? Or the next one? And do I constantly have to give them to all of them? Or do I stop and think about it every time? Or what do I do? What does it mean to do good? Maybe it's all about something else. Maybe it's about the number of good things he's talking about. Maybe I should think about the things I do that are selfish, and I should try to offset those with some unselfish things. Maybe I should do some good things to outweigh the bad things that I do in my life. Maybe that's the right thing. Maybe it's not about money and the guy in the corner. You can see why it gets confusing, don't you? Or maybe you think it's going to be this one, right? You're like, oh, I know where he's going with this. Do good with your money. He wants me to check the giving box at church. Because they're going to pass a plate later on, and he wants me to put some money in the plate because the money is kind of the thing that churches talk about. But I want us to understand something. It's not any of those things. I mean, it might be all of those things, but it's not any of those things, because here's the important thing that we need to understand. God isn't looking for us to do good every once in a while. He's looking for us to do good as a lifestyle. Now, I want you to take that home with you. I want you to store that away, that God isn't looking for you to do good every once in a while. God is looking for you to do good as a lifestyle. Now, here's the problem. Man, if we're going to start talking about our lifestyles, then we are not just talking about something you do on the outside, right? It's not just, hey, when I see a guy like this, I'm going to give him some dollars. Or it's not just when I see this need, I'm going to go meet it. It's not just that I do some good things to outweigh my bad things. And it's not just that I check a box like giving at church. That he wants us to understand that he's not looking for us to do good every once in a while. God is looking for you and I, for people like us, regular, everyday people, to do good as a lifestyle. That's a big difference. So, because if we're going to talk about our lifestyles, then we have to talk about our life. And if we're going to talk about our life, then we have to talk about our stories. I love good stories. I love good stories. I like to watch movies. You know, like I'm not a big fiction reader because I get wrapped up in it for 1 second and then I'm like, oh, I'll start over, do something else. I read a lot of nonfiction books, but I love watching movies because there's just this story that unfolds. You ever turn a movie on and you're like, I love this movie. I love movies with a good story. I don't love movies that end poorly, you know? I don't like sad endings to a movie. I hated Titanic because as pretty as you might make the music and there might be all these great little things and 2 people could clearly fit on that door. But like all of that stuff, like all those things, thousands of people died. I don't care if you put a cool song to it or not. It doesn't matter. Thousands of people died. My dog Skip. Have you ever seen my dog Skip? If you haven't, I'm going to spoil the ending for you. The freaking dog dies, okay? Like, it's a terrible, terrible movie. Nobody likes watching this. You watch it, you fall in love with the dog dies, the credits roll. That's it. So it's terrible. I like a good movie that draws me into the story. Stories matter to us. You've already told stories this morning. Somebody says, hey, how was your week? Oh, well, it's okay. You know, Monday was kind of a bear tough. It was, nice how it was rainy a little bit. My boss is a real jerk and I can't stand him. And then this happened. You told stories. Your story matters to you. The way you tell it, the things that you involve in it, they're all amazing parts of your life. They make up who you are. But here's the thing. We all have the same story, really. And I know what you're saying. We don't really have the same story. We kind of don't, but we kind of do. I mean, I know the details of your story are different than the details of my story. The mistakes you've made in your life, different from the mistakes I've made in my life. Not that they're any worse or better. They're just different. Made them at different times in different places. The backstory of your story is a little different than my story. I mean, most of you are from the South, not all of us. Right? But I'm very obviously not from the South, you know. I had to learn which bless your heart to use at which appropriate time. Didn't realize it could mean I really feel sorry for you and I feel sorry for you because you're stupid. So, but like I figured that out eventually. Most of the time because people were telling me I was stupid. So, but the thing is that like there are stories, our backstories aren't the same. I mean, a lot of things about our stories are different, but they all have basically the same thing. Most stories like movies start in a really positive place. You know, they start with a little bit and then they create a tension later. Our story, all of our stories start at a funeral. I know it feels weird, doesn't it? That we start at a funeral because funerals aren't normally really good things, right? They're not really positive in any way. But our stories all really begin in a funeral. Here's what I mean. In Ephesians chapter 1, if you were to, Ephesians chapter 2, you will read this story. What Paul's telling this church, a lot like us, is all of our stories, the same stories that connect you and I together, are the same stories that connect them together. And here's the deal. They connect you and I to them. So let's look at Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1. It says this. Once you and I, all of us, were dead because of our disobedience and your many sins. Now, like some of you are like, well, this is a pretty heavy place to start our story, isn't it? You know, like you and I were dead because of our disobedience and our many sins. Now, some of you might think that you don't have very many sins. I got plenty to spare. We can share. It averages out, right? So like we've got many sins, every one of us. You used to live in sin. We used to live in this place where we were broken. He says, you used to live in sin, the commander of the powers of the unseen world, obeying him, obeying the devil and the commanders and the powers of the unseen world. So he starts getting this little eerie feel to our story. It begins with our death. It begins at our funeral. It begins with us disobeying God and obeying evil. And here's the deal. He says he is the spirit of the work at heart in those who refuse to obey God. And the next one, look at this. The next verse says, all of us used to live that way. We all used to live that way, following the passionate desires and the inclinations of our sinful nature. See, our stories, all of us, they begin at a funeral. They begin at a place where we're dead. Now listen, funerals are not usually very positive, are they? Because no matter what you do to it, it never turns out good. You know, like I've been to funerals, I'm a pastor, so I do funerals. You know, that happens. Somebody passes away, I show up at the thing, and they have those, I don't know where they get it, funerallamps.com, but you ever notice they always have these tall lamps, and they have like this really thick glass on it. It has like this rose color at the top. And what is the deal with rose light bulbs? You know, like these weird lighting and just dark and dingy. And then you go to a brand new funeral home, right? And it's beautiful inside and it's super sharp and it still feels not great, you know? No matter where you put it, you could put it in a fun house and it would not be fun because it's just a weird place, isn't it? No matter what you do, I've been telling Sheila for years, I don't want a regular funeral. I want a stand-up comedian at my funeral, right? And I want somebody to make my arms move. That would be hilarious. But like somebody like slap my knee every once in a while, or there's something. It would be hilarious. And I don't want to have a regular funeral. But here's the deal: whether you have a lame funeral, whether you sing hymns, whether you have a comedian. My dad went to a funeral where they had hot dogs on a roller grill and the Cubs games playing, right? Like it doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the funeral, guess what's always in common? There's still somebody inside the casket. They never end positively, right? I mean, we go to these things because we care about the people who are alive, but they never end positively. Ours is different. In Ephesians 1, it starts out with our death, but it becomes really positive all of a sudden. I love these two words that the next verse starts out with. The beginning of verse 4 just blows me away. These two words just kill it, right? All of a sudden, because you and I feel this tension all the time, don't we? We feel this tension that we're like hopeless. That's what he paints in the first couple of verses, that we're hopeless. But you guys, you feel this all the time, right? Doesn't your money feel hopeless? Doesn't your marriage feel hopeless? How about your relationships? Hopeless, your marriage sometimes doesn't feel hopeless. But here's how the next verse starts, but God. I love those two words. If you remember nothing else today, remember those two words, because those two words matter more than anything else. Everything in life feels like we're falling apart, like a leper on a treadmill. I get to make that joke again, I love it. But God, when life feels like it's hurting, but God. When life feels like you're lost in all your sin and mess, but God is so rich and in mercy, and he loved us so much. I mean, isn't that amazing? I don't know about you, but that's huge for me. Now, here's the problem. Our story started a funeral, and sometimes we never get to this part of it. We get to the part where we're lost in our sin. And if you're here today and you're not quite sure of this whole Jesus thing, you got one foot on the brake and your arms out and you're not sure yet, I want you to know something. We're thrilled you're here. Like we talked about earlier, we're thrilled that you're here to be a part of this and you're asking questions. And it's safe for you to believe something different than what we believe. It's okay for you to belong here long before you believe the way we believe. But I want you to understand something. Until you come to this place where you want to accept the love that God has for you, your story begins at a funeral and it's stuck there. We're still stuck in our death of our sin. All of our stories get stuck somewhere. We're going to talk about where a lot of us are stuck today in a minute. But it begins at a funeral, and a lot of times we get stuck there because we've got a lot of questions. Ask all the questions, but know that it comes down to a decision. Do I want to accept or reject the God who loves us so much? He's so rich in love and mercy that he gave his son for us. That's a pretty powerful story. So your story might be stuck there, but for a lot of us, you got up this morning, you got yourself dressed, you got your kids dressed, you got your husband dressed, you argued with them all the way here, right? You got in here in the magic concrete, you stepped the argument. As soon as you step on it, you're like, hey, everything's great. And you get inside, you're here, right? Your story might be stuck a little further down the road than this. The story of this passage goes on, Starts at a funeral, begins this redemption process, tells the story of God's love and mercy, amazing stuff. In verse 5, it says that even though, this is where a lot of us understand the goodness of God, even though we were dead in our sins, he gave us life and raised Christ from the dead. And we're here because we want to sing that. It's what we sang about Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound, saved a wretch like me. Once was lost, but now I'm found, but I was blind, but now I see. Those are powerful phrases to us because we recognize that we were once dead and then we were set free. But here's the problem. Our story didn't get stuck in the funeral parlor. Our story gets stuck on the road. We get to this part of it where we're set free and we're like, yes, I'm in. I raised my hand. I walked an aisle. I got into some water. I made a profession of faith and I'm a Christian. And then we hit the brakes. And then there's nothing more really behind that. Ephesians 2:7 goes on after this verse. After the verse, you just kind of jump a little bit ahead because I don't want to be here forever, but here's the deal. So he says that God does this so that he can do something. There are two kinds of rich people in this world. There are rich people that talk to you, and then you're hanging out with them, and then a minute later you find out that they're rich. And then you're like, crap, I should have been much nicer to that guy, you know? I went to dinner with a guy, right, this one time, and it was a bunch of pastors, like 5 or 8 of us, and we're around this table, and they asked this guy to come in and talk, and he talked, and I had some idea that he was, that he did really well in life. And I won't mention his name, but he was the president of a very large technical company, and we are just now using the first processors that he didn't design. He's not just rich, he's freaking rich, okay? Like, he's crazy rich guy, okay? And I didn't know it because he just looks like an everyday dude, right? Drives a Ford Taurus, like just an everyday looking guy, and makes about $7 to $10 million a year. I'm like, oh yeah, I should have been much nicer to that guy, right? But there are other people who you meet them and they flaunt it, They got the nice clothes. They always carry the purse that has the LV on it, and it's not the knockoff that you get somewhere else that looks, the L's a little weird looking, or something, and they've got a nice car, or they've got this or that, and they kind of flaunt it a little bit. God is like that second one. He doesn't hide his riches. He flaunts it. I mean, he shows it off. He's so rich in love and mercy that he loves to lavish it out on people. And he does that for a reason. This is why he does it in verse 7. So God can point us all in the future ages as examples of the incredible wealth of his grace and kindness towards us. He does that, right? He pours out love and mercy and kindness and graciousness on us so that he can point to us as examples of his love and graciousness and kindness. He wants to be gracious and kind to you and loving to you because he wants to point back to his goodness. And some of you are like, and I get it. Isn't that a little egotistical? Why does God want to point back to himself all the time? Let me ask you this question. I had a teenager ask me that question a long time ago. She said, but doesn't it seem kind of selfish of God? I just had this one question. If God's not going to point the attention at himself, the attention has to be pointed somewhere, right? So who's it going to be pointed at? I mean, I know it doesn't go to my neighbor, right? Maybe it should go to me. No, it shouldn't go to me. Maybe it should go to you. Maybe it should go to you. No, God's the King of kings, right? He's the King of all the kings. He's the Lord of all the lords. He's the creator. He was before everything. He's in everything, and he's the thing that holds it all together. So who else would this attention go to? So God invests his love and mercy in us because he's so good, and then he gives it to us so that he can point later on to his own glory. It matters. God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in him. I love the way John Piper says that. That is powerful to me because God wants to invest his goodness and love and mercy in you and me because he wants to show off his goodness and love and mercy. And it's powerful stuff. And he says it in the next verse. And this is where most of us are tapping the brakes. Ephesians 2:8-9. This is a different translation than we talked about earlier, just to kind of break it up for us a little bit. But 2:8-9 says, God saved you by his grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. We're not very good at that, right? We like to take credit for stuff. And you can't take credit from this. It's a gift from God. It's free. It's not something you can do, not something you can earn. Salvation is not a reward for the good things you've done so that no one can boast about it. When you go to work, you work in a world of wages, don't you? You walk in, you punch a clock, you produce a product, you sell something, you buy something, you do whatever you do, right? And you get that thing and you give of your life and you get a check. That's not a negotiation. You don't need to say thank you, although it's polite and kind to say thank you for handing it to me, but I expect to be paid because I've worked to earn those resources, right? So it's not wages. And it's not a reward, he says. It's not something you do, oh, you're so good. You've done really well. I'm going to reward you for that. God doesn't give us goodness and mercy and love and grace because we're good and a reward for us. He doesn't give it to us because we're good. He gives it to us because he's good. So here's the problem, and this is where a lot of us struggle. We don't want to accept grace. We don't want to accept a gift because we like to earn things in our world, right? Especially us guys. We like to earn stuff. We don't like to be given stuff. But salvation is a gift, and you cannot earn it. The only way you can accept salvation is literally just to take it and say thank you. Take it and live a life that thanks God. And here's the crazy part. Now remember how this is unfolding. It starts at a funeral. We're released from the funeral. God gives us this amazing love. He's so gracious in love and mercy, so rich in kindness. He invested in us. And it's by his grace that we've been saved through faith. It's not of ourselves. It's the gift of God. And it's not of works, so that you can't boast about it. And then most of us slide our story into park. That's where most of us live. Now, flashback just for a second. Your story has gone from a funeral to freedom, right? You've gone from death to life. And most of us put our story in park and we live in Ephesians 2:8-9. We love Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace you've been saved through faith, not of yourself. It's the gift of God, not of works, so that no one can boast about it. And we love that stuff. We want to put an exclamation mark at the end of it. We want to put a t-shirt on it. We want to put a bumper sticker out. We want to get this rally around it. And we love grace. We love what God's done for us. But most of us have been living in this world. But I want you to remind you what Paul said to Timothy. Paul said to teach those who are good, who are rich in this world, to do good with their resources. God's not looking for people to be good every once in a while. He's looking for you and I to do good as a lifestyle. So what he wants us to do is not live in Ephesians 2:8-9, but move on to Ephesians 2:10. Because the next verse says, for we, right, you and I are God's masterpiece. He says that you are created anew in Christ Jesus so that you can do the good things that God had planned for us long ago. Most of our stories are in park, or at least a lot of our stories are in park. Went from funeral freedom, man, we love that part. We went from funeral freedom, we went from death to life, but we didn't move on to lifestyle. And that's really the question, isn't it? When we talk about it, God isn't looking for us to do good every once in a while. God's looking for us to do good as a lifestyle. That's the struggle that we have. That here's the problem. Most of us went from funeral freedom. We went from death to life, but we never made it to lifestyle. Now, I love our church, man. I got to be honest with you. Man, Friday night, I was blown away. I mean, not just at our band. Like, listen, I don't even want to count the hours that vocalists and our musicians and have invested in practicing and rehearsing. There's a difference, rehearsing and going over all this stuff and then getting up there, and the nerds, I talked to them before and they were like, their stomachs were in knots, and like, there's hundreds of people here, and if you ask me, there were thousands, but whatever. Like, like all these people gathered, and it's just intimidating, all the work, and we're all exhausted from it. I love it, man. I love it. Some of you, many of you were there. You invited friends. You sat with them. I mean, that's awesome. It's amazing how great. I love that a lot of us get it. It's so cool. I love that this morning there's a third grade classroom where, where a teacher or leader is looking in the eyes of a kid and telling them that the room is brighter because they're in it. I love that there's a preschool worker who's playing with a kid, probably right now, playing with some Legos and telling them that, that our preschool classroom is more fun because you're here with it. Because some of those kids won't feel all of that love this week. They won't ever hear about Jesus as easily at home as they do here. And because some of us need a partner. We need somebody to partner to come alongside and pick our kids up and tell them we love them. I love that this Wednesday night, all three of my girls will look into the eyes of a volunteer who cares about their story, who loves them, and will listen to what's going on there. Because, my kids have gotten to the age where I don't know crap anymore, right? Like, I used to be the smartest guy on the planet, right? Now we don't know anything anymore. But those guys, the people who invest in our kids, they love them. They value their opinions in life. And Sheila and I are not committed to being the person who's at the center of every conversation. We're committed to our kids taking their next step toward Jesus. And I'm thrilled to have volunteers who love our kids and wrap their arms around them and listen to their stories and look in their eyes and care about them. And that matters to me because most of these people, if not all of them, they're not doing good every once in a while. They're doing good as a lifestyle. So here's the question for you. Where are you at in your story? Is your story stuck? What's your next step? If your story started in a funeral and you're still not sure about this whole Jesus thing, then your next step is take your foot off the brake and begin to trust Jesus with eternity and with your life. Begin to start that relationship with him. Maybe your story's past that part. Maybe you've gotten from the funeral to freedom, right? Maybe you've gotten from death to life, but you've been stuck in Ephesians 2:8-9. You've been saved by grace through faith. It's not of yourself. It's a gift from God. It's not of works. It's easy. You're not wanting to boast about it, and you've been living there forever. And maybe now you're feeling like God's pulling at your heart and saying you need to do good, not just every once in a while, but as a lifestyle. So here's the question for you. Will you? Will you do good as a lifestyle? Now listen, there are lots of places you can do good. There are tons and tons and tons of places that you can do good. I can't think of a better one than Journey Church. I mean, I'm maybe I'm biased, okay? I get it. I understand that I'm biased, but I think I'm right too, okay? But here's the deal. There are thousands of great places that aren't here to do good work, and that's great. And you can be a part of it and do good, not just every once in a while, but as a lifestyle. But I can't think of a better place than to get connected here, because I'll promise you this. We want to be about helping people get from a funeral to freedom, from death to life, and from life to a lifestyle. So here's the question for you. Will you do something? I mean, like the stop-in by the connection table is a great next step. The connection table is a place that we created so that you can go from Ephesians 2:8-9 to Ephesians 2:10. It's just that simple to say, I want to be a part of doing good. I want to pour a cup of coffee. I want to be a greeter at the door. I want to help in the parking lot. I want to clean up. I want to do some administrative stuff. I want to help with kids ministry. There's all kinds of things. It takes hundreds of volunteers to pull off every single weekend, because this place is a place that's always been a church on the move. And the best way to get connected around here is to get behind it with both shoulders and push. But I know what it's like, right? I get it. It's terrifying. You're going, I don't know if I have time for that. I get it. I understand. You have time for that. We've created spaces at Journey where you can start by serving just like a couple hours a month. Really very simple times. We've got places where you can serve a couple hours a week. They're great opportunities. If you're here and you're not sure about this whole faith thing yet, you're not even sure you believe in Jesus, there are places at Journey where you can serve and become a part of it. Because this is a great place to be around and ask your questions and figure this stuff out in our community. Because this is what we talk about when we say this is a family weekend. It matters to us. So here's the thing that we have to figure out. Is your obstacle bigger than your God? That's really the question. Is the reason that you're not doing good as a lifestyle, is it bigger than God's but God? That's a big deal. Because there's a lot of us going, man, I don't know, Jeremy, you don't know my story, I had this problem in the past, or that issue here, or this issue there. It was so great this weekend. This week I got to send out a letter that accompanied our giving statements from the third quarter. And so sent it out and finally got it out to you. If you got that, I'm glad you got it because it took a couple tries. But I sent this letter out, and then I got to include a kind of anonymous story that someone came to me, a mom came to me a couple weeks ago, and nearly tears in her eyes, just so happy. And she says to me, "I'm so thankful for you." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "For me? What are you talking about?" "Oh, just, you have no idea what it means that my son can serve." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Of course he can serve." "Well, he's made some mistakes, and he's done some dumb stuff, and, kind of messed up. And we kind of thought his life was kind of over at this point, not really going to ever be able to do it," because they'd been around church for a while, and they'd been around Christians for a while, and sometimes Christians are not, despite the fact that we're so forgiven, we're not very forgiving sometimes. And so she was like blown away, and I'm like, "Of course he can serve. I mean, he wants to put that stuff behind him, and he wants to make new choices and steps and go forward, and of course he can serve. Why is there a question?" It's just terrible that there's a question like that, even in our minds. But you're probably asking that same question. Can I really be a part of this? Can I really do what God is calling me to do, or have I traded that away? Yes. God called you not to live in Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, but to do good works that he planned in advance for you to do. So the question isn't not will you or won't you. The question is, why is your story stuck in Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, when God really has you to live in Ephesians 2:10? God's not looking for you to do good every once in a while. He's looking for you to do good as a lifestyle. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we're just thankful to you that so many great things are available to us. I mean, we think about the fact that we began our relationship with you in death, and you brought us to life. That you give us freedom, that you give us the ability to walk away from the terrible choices we've made and not have them held against us. But it's even more than that. It blows us away that you call us broken people to bring glory to you. And that you want to show off your goodness and your mercy and your love, your grace in our lives. But God, we feel crippled. The enemy's told us that we're disqualified, that we're not good enough, and we're not strong enough, we're not capable of that kind of goodness. So Jesus, we just pray that you would help us to recognize that we need freedom from that lie, that we need you. And I pray that you'd bind the enemy in the hearts of all of our people, that today that we would never believe the words of disqualification and the never believe the lies that would tell us that we can't be used by you, and that you would set us free, not just from death, not just from the funeral, but you'd set us free from this life stuck in a place without action. God, we're just thankful to you. In your name we pray. Amen.